Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 858, Richard's here, and we've got a lot to fit in. We're talking about new Raspberry Pi models, which sounds interesting. We'll be talking about Powershell. We'll be talking new builds of Windows 11 and that 22H2. And it's a year since we first saw Windows 11, so we'll talk about that as well. Talk about Goodwood Festival of Speed and some of the great tech that Richard saw there, and lots more. So let's get straight to Richard. Good evening.
Good evening. Yes, how are you, Ian?
Yes, okay. Very good. Welcome back. That was good fun last week with Ian Cunningham launching things into space.
You can't beat space stuff, can you? Yeah. Although I think he's been a bit trumped by the by Nano Avionics today, who showed off their first satellite selfie stick. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I didn't see that. No.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, basically, it's they sent up a CubeSat. I think it's the MP42, which is. It's kind of like I guess you can think it's almost like a Raspberry Pi. It's basically it's an ARM system on chip thing. It's got about, I think it's got a gig of RAM in total. It can take like 4 micro SD cards, and it's just a CubeSat. But what they did was it's often the pain when you launch these things. You kind of want to look at your satellite or spacecraft to see if it's okay. Particularly in terms of looking at the payloads have been deployed, or there's any micrometeoroid damage or what have you. And so what they did, they basically took a sort of standard off-the-shelf GoPro Hero 7, I believe, which I think it's a 12 megapixel camera, dismantled it, stuck it on a custom-built selfie stick, and then had it spring out, and then take pictures of the satellite with the Earth photobombing in the background.
Oh, brilliant.
I would strongly recommend a trip to the Nano Avionics site. I think it's on YouTube as well, because you'll get the animation of the selfie stick popping out. But yeah, it's great actually. So yeah, I did think of last week. I thought, well, it's been well and truly trumped here by a GoPro in orbit. I think it's about 550 kilometers up, and and in the background behind the satellite, you can just make out Australia and the Great Barrier Reef and things. So it's pretty cool stuff.
That's excellent. It's great. It's great now with the size and the low power ratios and the affordability of tech like that you can do this kind of thing now.
Well, exactly, because of course the thing is, make actual space hardware is really expensive, but people are getting more and more creative with what is really off the shelf stuff. So it's just getting cheaper and cheaper. And I also think about, say, the Raspberry Pis in the space station. Again, good examples of what is pretty much unmodified off-the-shelf hardware, except it's got some sort of fancy cases, and working around any issues in software. So I think it is exciting. I mean, obviously there'll always be a case for space hardware, particularly if you're doing very expensive deep space missions. And the camera, it's a great thing if you've got the light and the bandwidth and the capacity to actually stick one on. There'll be occasions where scientists will think, well, we don't really want that because, one, it's too dark, and two, we're going to get telemetry from other sensors, so it's not really required. Good example would be the James Webb Space Telescope, where it amuses you seeing scientists answer the same question over and over again, which is, why is there no camera? Why is there no camera to show the things? Well, one, it's really dark, and two, there's just no point. We'd rather have that payload being used for more science. So understand the pros and cons, but it's still good to see. It's really good, really exciting to see this stuff being developed and being accessible, really.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. So we're going to catch up with Ian on a future show to see how far he gets with his Raspberry Pi in space. But actually, some Raspberry Pi news which you'll be bringing us later in the show as well.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. So yeah, that was good fun. Really enjoyed talking with Ian, and to make sure you check out his video and links from last week's show. We've got quite a few things I wanted to touch on this week. We did get some new builds. I believe you went to an event that I was really envious because one of my favourite events, which we'll talk about. Windows 11 and some other stuff as well. So I wanted to start with the biggest news story of the week. I'm sure you've been following this fully, and that was the update to Windows 11 service pipelining test.
Yeah, I was very excited, Ian. Let me tell you. I mean, I was nervous. I was worried that nothing was going to happen. But then, phew! Thank goodness they tested the servicing pipeline once more, because I wouldn't want that servicing pipeline to not work. So it's good it's been tested again.
Yeah, it hasn't been tested much, but actually this goes with the build that they released last week, which was 25145. Last few builds haven't been particularly that exciting, really. I don't think there was very much to shout about in last week's build, unless you were using Braille, which looks like that was quite an interesting thing, for accessibility. Native Braille support, isn't it? So it switches between the different readers and native readers and the Windows screen reader. But apart from that, I don't think there was a huge amount in there, was there?
No, I mean they brought in some more subscription some more Microsoft services subscription management settings. I think OneDrive.
That was it, yeah.
OneDrive stuff is in there as well, which is, I mean, I do worry a bit that they're starting to get to skate on very thin ice here, because I imagine the likes of Dropbox and Google Drive will say, well, how about account management for our services as well? But so yeah, that kind of inbox integration is very convenient if you're a Microsoft Services customer, which clearly you're going to need to be when Windows 11 22H2 finally comes out, because that's going to obviously mean that if you're running it locally, you're going to have a Microsoft account, which means you're going to have to be sort of signed up to the services. If not a paying customer, you're still going to be you have to be signed up, unless of course your PC is sort of an enterprise PC or education PC, in which case you have your account somewhere else. But so this integration has turned up, and yeah, I'm a little concerned that it is starting to feel very, very much like it's, all these services are now being built into Windows 11, perhaps more so than maybe they should be. But I guess that's up for the regulators to decide. Yeah,
I like the integration when it's things like in File Manager and everything else. The account settings, I'm not really that bothered about that.
I mean, it's very convenient. It's very convenient. Don't get me wrong. If you're a subscriber, but I can see if you're a competitor, you think, well, this feels like users are really being shepherded down a certain path, which Microsoft came massively unstuck with that 20 odd years ago.
Yeah, and certainly OneDrive integration in Windows 11. It's very integrated now, isn't it? It really is.
It really is, and I believe there's cases going through the European courts at the moment regarding that level of integration, because competitors like, I think, Nextcloud, I think is that they're called in Germany, they're who operate kind of like a user managed self-hosted cloud storage, are complaining that, well, users are being funneled down this particular path, and it's an interesting game that Microsoft's playing. I mean, again, as an end user and as a OneDrive user, I find it very, very convenient. But I can also see the argument that it's making it harder to use competitors. So we'll see what happens. I think it'll be an interesting few years for the Microsoft legal team.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they have they have a big enough department.
They'll need it.
I suppose the other thing that there is good news with is that now they fixed the Surface Pro X issue where it would resume from sleep, so which is good.
Yeah, that was really bad, wasn't it? Although I was looking at some metrics, and I think there's more people running Windows and ARM through Apple M1 Macs than through several approved Windows and ARM based solutions. And I have to say, it all worked very, very well indeed. It does work very well indeed on my M1 Mac, and the Surface Pro X. Yes, it did have a problem with our sleeps.
Yeah. So yeah, these builds are okay, but yeah, we're in that lull again now, aren't we? We had a bit of a there was a lot of new features, and then
I was all excited about Tabs and File Explorer, and then it turned up in the beta. I thought, oh crikey, that's so much fun now.
And it's actually it's on release preview now as well, isn't it? So
it is. Has it gone to release preview?
I think it has. Yeah, I think so. I've seen it on one of my devices. I get confused now though which one's up.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take your word for it. There's been a lot of builds being, because I think Windows 10, the 2022 H2 went to release preview recently as well, didn't it? So I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure that the File Explorer stuff is in the Windows 11 release preview, but I'm happy to stand corrected on that one.
It's not if you unless you're on the 22H2, which was to Seekers.
Oh, so you see, it's all very confusing.
Yeah, so if you were So if you've chosen to install 22H2, you get tabs. But if you've not done anything and just letting it do automatic updates on release preview, then I don't think you will get it. I think that's the way it's going to work. But yeah, it was 2 weeks ago. It went to the beta channel, so you might be right.
Yeah, that's because it's 2261 is going to be the build that we think is going to be the actual. That's what's in release preview now, and then it's the point release after that, which I think beta's on 160. I think release preview's on one a bit earlier. But
yeah,
again, yeah, it's just a sign of just how confusing this all is right now as to where each thing is. I mean, I would be a little bit surprised at this stage if Explorer tabs actually made it into 22H2, because I think they're going to come almost straight away afterwards. I think right now they concentrate on getting what's in release preview as stable as they possibly can. So I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was always the plan, but then they sort of changed their mind a little bit on that with the way that they pushed it through to the beta channel.
Yeah, and it is great because it is I had to write up recently what was in 22H2, and it was there's not actually that much. It's kind of been cleared up some more. It's not. I mean, there's a few changes under the hood, perhaps around manageability, but it's not actually that big, visually speaking. Maybe the start menu groups would perhaps be the biggest visual change. But if File Explorer tabs went in, that would be a huge change. I have to say, I really like the File Explorer tab stuff. It works really well for me. It suits my workflow perfectly.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, and I like the way you can drag and drop and things like that. So yeah, it works really well.
Yeah, exactly. If only they'd make the experience consistent, because Edge, of course, works in a completely different way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Actually, it's a year, isn't it? Well, as this sort of year yesterday, as we go out on Thursday, or a year 2 days ago, that the first public preview was available of Windows 11, and I think it's a year since I got my first video out of Windows 11.
Yes, indeed. We were cheerfully sticking it on ARM devices and Raspberry Pis and stuff.
Yeah.
Had the hardware compatibility list turned up by now? I can't remember if it had or hadn't.
No, I don't think it had, because I was looking back at some of my articles from that week, and we didn't really go into very much on hardware compatibility, so I don't think it had. I think it was because it was all just the Windows Insider stuff. I think there was like you unsupported versus supported and that kind of thing. It was around that time when it got quite confusing. There was a number of different things coming out, and I never mentioned it in my article at the time, so I'm pretty sure that wasn't the case. So they installed it on my Surface Go, which is an unsupported device.
Well, exactly, and
it still is.
And it does infamously work on unsupported devices quite happily. If you do the registry hack that Microsoft themselves have documented, but of course at some point it will stop working. Yeah,
well, there is the something else actually we'll come back to. I want to mention about that, but do you know what build the launch build was?
No, I don't, but I'm waiting for you to tell me, because I bet you know.
Yeah, it was 2200.51.
Oh,
and do you know what we're on now?
Oh, which channel, Ian?
Release. I think the last count I got was 73.739.
Yeah, I was going to say it's in 700s now, isn't it? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. But no major build. But of course, that's what 22H2 is. That's the build. So that's when we'll go on to the 2.3 range, isn't it?
Yeah, because 22H2 is currently it's in the 22621 major.
Yeah, that's what it'll be. Yeah.
And then dev channel is currently at 2.5, isn't it? I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, fun and games. It's not too confusing.
and you mentioned about compatibility as well. I think there's an impending compatibility thing going to come up where you mentioned that device is not being supported. I think that if you've installed Windows 11 on an unsupported device, I don't think 22H2 will automatically install. I think you'll get the cumulative updates, but you won't get 22H2.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
That's a guess. That's my guess. And I've got a couple of. One, Microsoft always said you wouldn't get new builds, and these cumulative upgrades aren't really builds, are they? So a build is the full thing with like this 22H2. So that's why I think that. Also, I've got a virtual machine that's despite having two CPUs and GPM enabled, it still thinks it's on an unsupported device. I think I probably need to up the memory. But that hasn't been offered the 22H2 preview. You know, it's as I mentioned before, seekers. You can go and look for it. My release preview one hasn't picked that up yet. And I think it is available if you click on on my Surface laptop. It did pick it up. So
I see. Okay, so through Windows Update, you think it might not? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, thinking about it, I've got a Windows 11 device it's got TPM but no CPU support, and that hasn't been offered it actually on release preview.
That's it. Yeah.
I was going to try out the ISO and see what that does. So
I'm sure the ISO will work. Well, actually, I say I'm sure it does. Normally, the installer does check, doesn't it? It does bomb out the installer if on an unsupported device. I remember it well, so from doing those Windows NT to Windows 11. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case. Actually, I might try the ISO on one of my virtual machines. But that's my thinking, is that an unsupported device that's currently running Windows 11 will stay unsupported, and it won't get 22H2. My Surface Go does have it, but that's because I did the registry. But it had it originally. It was part of the insider program, so they kind of grandfathered those in anyway, didn't they? So so that's okay. So anyway, that's what I think. So there may be a few people say, oh, I've not got the update, but then if you're on unsupported device, you probably did the registry hack or ISO, or you probably did something to get it on there in the first place, so you'd just be expected to do that again. We'll see. There is actually a registry setting that I've seen a few people talking about, but Microsoft haven't confirmed it yet, that it shows a 22H2 readiness state to sort of red or amber or green. I've not written about this yet because I've only seen it from sort of third parties, and I want to make sure I'm on the right track before I write anything down. But I think Windows itself has a compatibility check to know whether you can have 22H2, or and the same ways that Windows 10 knows you can have Windows 11. And I guess the same the hardware list continues as it was. This is still the same minimum requirements.
Yeah.
Now, if you're running a really old operating system, you might actually see a message telling you that you're out of support, because a few sites have reported that Windows 8.1 is getting some nagging messages saying it's going out of support. I don't know if you've seen this story, but
yeah, I mean, I've seen this story. I've not seen it personally, and I've not heard anything confirmed from Microsoft yet. I've seen a story that there's I think it's a Windows 8, because obviously I think 10th of is it 10th of January next year? I think that's when Windows 8.1 RT, Windows 7 ESU, they all die at the same time, I think, pretty much. So I understand that Microsoft has started to put nags or warnings in these areas to say, well, this is it. You've got not many months left to go before you either have to move on or get ready for no more support.
Yeah. So I've got a virtual machine running Windows 8.1 here, and I've had no messages on it at all. It's got the latest updates installed. Actually, I noticed as well, I installed it and then did all the latest updates, and look what I've got. New Microsoft Edge, the new one. It automatically installs it as part of the Windows update procedure.
It's unavoidable.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they can go back and get that on there, but you're not supported. But yeah, you've got the full release version of Microsoft Edge, the new Edge. You've got the latest version of there. So I was quite surprised to see that.
If you're using the Surface RT, do you just do IE and that's it, nothing else?
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing that's going to be another factor for the demise of Surface RT, in that Internet Explorer, as far as my concern, died a few weeks ago. So
yeah, this has been a problem for a while for some people that were still using RTs. That you don't get updated.
Again, I really like my Surface RT. It was a great device. It just, if only Microsoft hadn't locked it down quite as much as they did, I think it would have been, and just allowed different browsers on there. I know there was this obsession with iTunes from some people, but really that wasn't for me the major problem. The major problem for me was Internet Explorer, even back then, was feeling quite clunky and weird.
Yeah.
And so I was disappointed there was no alternatives I could see.
Yeah. So if you notice, the Internet Explorer is still actually on here, but it did install Edge and take over the defaults and everything. But yeah. But anyway, no nag messages on my machine. I'll keep trying and see if I can get that. See if I can get that to come up at any point.
Excellent.
Now, something that you did last week that I was very envious of is you got a trip to Goodwood's Festival of Speed. I've been a couple of times as a paying punter, but you actually got to go on the press day. So, did you see any interesting tech stuff while you were there?
I did indeed, actually. Yeah, it was. I have to say, it was extremely cool, and obviously very fortunate to go on the press day, which was a Thursday. Yes, saw a good few things, particularly around the Future Lab, where I met a few people. I think probably most notable would maybe be the Tesla suit people, no relation to Tesla itself, which is, I mean, they're quite famous for their VR haptic suit. Which is basically, imagine a wetsuit you put on, very tight, and it's just covered in sort of pads and things that dispense little electric shocks, or sort of, it's a lot. It's like a tens machine, and of course doesn't look at all if you're just standing in it looking at the real world. You think, ow, I've been shocked by this dreadful thing as I calibrate it. But then as soon as you put on a VR headset, or allow yourself to be immersed while looking at a screen or whatever, then suddenly it all makes a lot more sense. I mean, they did two very memorable demonstrations where they said, okay, we're now going to give you the sensation of it raining on you, and it did. Wearing the suit, it felt like rain was falling on you.
Wow!
It was really quite intense, actually. And the other thing they did was a motor racing thing where they'd basically got I think it came from the Mercedes F1 team. They got Hamilton going around the track. Obviously, driver's view, the cockpit view, but they'd put the sensations, G-force sensations in the suits. You'd feel this, and again, initially just almost being shocked in various ways, and then as you got into it, you're given a steering wheel to hold and kind of pretend you were driving this car, and it was again very, very effective. So yeah, I mean, it's not consumer stuff. These things cost thousands, and it's not consumer grade. It's aimed at training. I think the suit gets used by the likes of NASA and the military and things to kind of do proper immersive training. But one new thing they had there, which I hadn't seen before, was the Tesla suit glove. Now I've seen haptic gloves before, where you'll reach out in VR, and obviously the glove is great because it's got the sensor, so it's the finger tracking much better than normal, really effective. And then as you touch a thing, the haptics and the fingertips will go off, so you'll feel textures and things in the VR world. But what this does, it goes one step further in that it also has force feedback, and there are a few companies that do force feedback, but not many. I think Meta showed up a prototype last year. I think I want to say Dexterbotics or something. I can't remember the name.
Right.
I think they're another company that do it. But anyway, this is the Tesla suit glove, and it'll exert, I think, about 9 newtons of force to kind of gives you a sensation.
Right.
It's not as much as it sounds. It's not going to bend your fingers back and snap them off. But what is cool about it is when it's quite lightweight, it's wireless. The batteries last for hours and hours and hours. And again, after a while, you don't really realize you're wearing it. You can sort of kind of feel the motors doing their stuff, but it's again a very, very effective thing. I think it costs about £17,000 for a pair, so it's not cheap.
Right. So I won't be getting one of those then.
Sort of thing that I think an enterprise or you'd use it for training, in a corporate, and that kind of money kind of fits into the training budget or the tools budget. It's just one more tool. I always remember when the HoloLens 2 came out, and I was speaking to a very large company that Microsoft had wheeled out, who were rolling it out to their on-site technicians, and they said, well, for us, it's our technicians have tools already in their vans that cost thousands. This is just one more tool, so it's not really a problem. So I think if you think in those terms, it isn't that much. If you're a consumer, it's ridiculous, but it is a good, you think, this is like that film Ready Player One. It's like just kind of feeling like you're moving towards that world. So I was, really impressed with that. That was a really exciting demonstration and perhaps a glimpse of where things could go for consumers in the future. The here and now, though, I saw another electric car, which was cool. Because last year I saw the Marcolino and the Trigo, which were brilliant. I think the Marcolino is now which is the BMW Isetta lookalike, and that's the bubble car thing. I think that's just gone into production, although the prices have to go up because of the issues with supply chain. But I had a look at the Northern Light Motors three-wheeler, which turned up, and to describe it, it's kind of a cross between a recumbent bike and maybe a Morgan 3 Super 3
Right.
two-seater. Don't use the word Sinclair seat because the two wheels are at the front, the rear wheels at the back. It's quite different, and and it's actually a really interesting device because one, you can order it now, so it's not a case of it's a weirdo future thing. These things are available now, although I think they've got quite a long backlog because people are quite keen to get hold of them. And there's the 3 levels you can go for. There's the 428, the 557, and the 630. I think those numbers are correct. I'm sure someone will pop up and correct me if I'm wrong there. They correspond to wavelengths of light, because obviously northern lights, you've got some reds, you've got some blues, you've got some greens. So yeah, so the 428 is just a normal kind of bike really, which you can retrofit if you want, battery and motor to create yourself an e-bike. So it's interesting, but it's £4,000, a lot of money. £5,000 is more. It's again the same thing again. So again, it's a single seat three-wheeler, one wheel at the back, two wheels still at the front. That gets you what's effectively an e-bike, and the range is tricky because obviously you've got to have there's human pedal power involved as well, and so you can get. I mean, they say officially it's 50 miles, but you can spec bigger batteries and things. And I think you'll get up to about 250 miles depending how you use it. And of course, because there's humans involved, if you pedal it, it'll work anyway. So, but what was interesting, and it's a shame Gary isn't here because I'll be very interested in his take on this, was the 630, which again is the same basic shell, three-wheeler, e-bike, recumbent bike thing, except it's an enclosed shell, as they all are, and that's £6,000, which again, it's a lot, but you look at kind of really good e-bikes, and you're probably not that. It's not unthinkable. Let's put it that way. And some EVs are unthinkably expensive still. Even now, they're still ridiculously expensive. So this thing, it's fully electric. So there's no pedal power, and they're quite conservative with their range. Starts at a 40-mile range. It's very much aimed at sort of short journeys because let's face it, we want to sit in this thing for any length of time. Yeah. It's not as luxurious as Gary's Jaguar or his Kia. But the key thing is it's three-wheeler, so it counts kind of as a moped, which means you only need you don't need a full license to drive this thing around. You can increase that range by fitting bigger batteries, and I think they said you can go up to like 100 miles, I think, before with bigger batteries before the handling starts to be affected by that hefty battery. The cockpit, you've got to be 5'6" to 6'2" to actually fit in the cockpit, and you mustn't weigh more than 120 kilos. So it's quite a small cockpit, but it's all doable. And it's actually it's quite an effective vehicle. I think if you're the sort of person who's not fazed by going on the road on a recumbent bike, then this is, I think, a real option, because I can imagine how you'd easily be able to use this. It's got some relatively limited luggage space on there as well, so you can pop to shops and things, go around town and thing. It's an interesting option. Initially I thought it was hilarious, and then I thought, actually, I can imagine myself having one of these because it's it's affordable, and other things is like the battery. You can pull the battery out and charge it at home, so you don't need to worry about sort of plugging it in. That it's although you wouldn't want to leave this on the street, that's for sure. But you can do that, and it's remarkably it's a very interesting device. They had one go around, not obviously up the hill, kind of Goodwood, but they had it go around the perimeter of Future Lab, and it was we thought I can easily see this working. It's a very interesting approach, and of course it's fully assembled in the UK. I mean, I gather from them they're not hit so much by supply chain issues because almost all the parts are sourced in the UK. So, which I think they were almost forced into because there's just so many problems getting parts abroad.
Yeah.
Because the supply chains being as bad as they are. I mean, let's face it, we in IT know all about that. But I think if you ordered one now, you get it by February, and it comes fully assembled. Whereas the other models have got the some user assembly required. Because this thing turns up, and there it is. It's good to go. And you've got a reversing camera. You've got a useful screen interface to sort of show you functions. You can control how powers this is fenced. And yeah, I have to say, initially amused. After a while, quite impressed.
Yeah, I thought you were going to mention the McMurty one, the fan car that's set the hill climb record. I thought you were going to go for one of those.
No, I wasn't going from those. No, actually, I'll tell you the thing that I thought was most hilarious on the hill climb wasn't all those. It was the Ford van, the Ford electric van is still hilarious to watch.
Yeah,
it goes so fast.
Yeah,
it's unbelievably fast. Although the thing, that's a weird looking car because I'm watching CGI because it doesn't seem to do any wrong. It just it's just stuck to the track all the way. It's an incredible vehicle. Although, if I'm honest, I mean, away from the gadgets and gizmos, the things like the bit of racing I enjoyed the most was there's no real racing per se. Goodwood, it's because the track is designed for timings. Was actually the drifting people who were
they're fantastic now.
Incredible skills to drift cars around in that smoke. And there was one team there. I must tell you, there's a Japanese car kit outfit called, I think they're called Liberty Walk, and they basically pitched up there and brought all their stuff, and they'd also brought a car and a driver as well. No one spoke any English, and so this very expensively fitted car went on the track, and the guy just smashed it up. He kept hitting things, and so, but the team found it hilarious. I guess it's the case that there's no such thing as bad publicity, but it was great. So the drifting was superb. Actually, the whole event was superb, and I would recommend anyone who's pondering about going. It's really worthwhile going. It's just great fun. It was well organised, and you were able to go. I mean, again, I had my pass, but I think you could probably. And you don't even need to be a massive petrol head now because Future Lab is generally really interesting, and there's other bits and pieces around that are also fascinating too. So you don't, I mean, I only saw maybe 2 hours worth of driving. I did spend the rest of the time just looking at stuff. And I think there was somebody had brought along, was it BP? I think they brought the Premiership trophy along as well, which you could go and stand and pretend you're holding it and get a picture. So if you're a football fan, that was there too. But for me, the two things that really caught my eye were the Tesla suit things and also the Northern Light motors. I think they're both very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It is a great event. I've been a couple of times and I found that just with your normal entry pass, everything's open. So the paddock where all the cars are, where I think this weekend they had Mansell's, Ferrari, and Williams. They're just there. You can't necessarily go in the garage because they're awnings. They're like tents, aren't they? Where all these cars are. But you've got like last year's Mercedes or McLarens. They're all there. Le Mans cars, rally cars, and you can more or less go, pretty much right up to them. And in fact, I think when I was there, I think they took my kids in for a photo of the McLaren car. They sat with the car. So it's a really good event, and I'm glad to see it's all back with its full capacity crowd and everything else like that. It was really nice to see. So I watched a bit of the highlights, and I think they're on YouTube and on Sky F1. You can catch the highlights of that. But seeing Mansell in the Red 5 Williams, which well, in fact, both it was in this 1990 Ferrari as well, which I've seen both of those at Silverstone at the time in 1990 and the 91, 92 when I was at Silverstone. So it brings back memories though. So it's a nice event, a nice friendly event as well. I think if you do something like the British Grand Prix, which is an amazing thing, amazing event, but it's very different to that. It's very relaxed and very open, and there's a lot of different things to see. So like you said, you don't necessarily, if you want to take the family and you're the motorsport fan, if you take the family along, they're going to enjoy it, because even if they're not really into motorsport that much, because there's so much else to see there as well. So Yeah,
Please
very
let me
nice
know.
event. Yeah, definitely like that. I'm just doing plans for next year's trip. So, but I was thinking about Goodwood, but I think I might be making the trip to Le Mans next year. So, I think that'll be my plan for next year. So, whether my Windows Phone FM radio will still work then, because I found that very useful last time I went. So, hopefully that'll still be working. Now, there was a couple of things we wanted to talk about. I've seen that there are changes in Microsoft around the PowerShell team.
Yes, yeah. Well, this is I mean, I guess this is the departure of Jeffrey Snover. I guess you mean which I mean, I'm not sure he was that heavily involved with PowerShell anyway, as he for some time, but he was a guy who kind of pushed it through. Crikey, when was this? This must have been about 15 years ago now. When did he do it? Or longer? Yes. So Jeffrey Snover, he's well, he's been at Microsoft, I think, for nearly 22 years. And he joined, I think, from Tivoli, having spent some time at Digital as well, doing Unix stuff. I think he saw Windows at NT, thought that's amazing, and then eventually got the call to join Microsoft. Must have been, I guess, around 2000 or in the last century. Went there, and he's kind of one of those people who you think, well, he obviously saw the future, because he went there and he took one look at what's happened and said, you know what's going to happen in the next few years? It's going to be all about very large data centers, all about that, which is, of course, what we now know as the cloud. And so he joined Microsoft at a very senior level, and said, well, actually, what we need is something to automate how we manage the cloud, or these very large data centers, as they were called then. And Microsoft, of course, was all about the GUI, but there wasn't really the kind of GUI things we take for granted now. Then it was all like the Windows GUI stuff. That they were very much the Windows company. And there's this guy who's come in and said, actually, no, we need a command line tool for this. This is based on command line. And I think in 2002 he wrote a paper describing what was needed, and pretty much described how PowerShell works. And then he kind of stepped back for the Windows stuff and began working on PowerShell, or what would become PowerShell, and had a really, really rough time. There's a really if you look on Twitter, I think he links to a talk he did in 2015 about the experience that he had, because the Microsoft execs at the time just weren't very supportive. It was I think one of them said, what exactly don't you understand about Windows? We're the Windows company. It's all about Windows. He said, no, we need to do this command line stuff. So, whereas the idea of a command line interface was just not what Microsoft were about. They're about Windows. Vista was coming out. And the other thing as well, which he championed, was .NET. And again, .NET was in its infancy. Didn't work particularly well, but Bill Gates was pushing .NET, so there was talk about trying to shove .NET into the US, and that didn't go down well at all. So you ended up in a situation where you had the applications team running with .NET, the Windows team going nowhere near it. You will not put .NET in Windows, but of course, he saw that for PowerShell it was quite important. So again, he pushed it, and he managed to get his own way. So, but I gather he was basically demoted within Microsoft while this was all happening, which I think he kept secret from many people except his wife. This had happened to him, and he does say that he, cost him actually a substantial amount of money, because of course he was seen as not pushing towards increasing Windows revenues with what he was doing. Now, as we now know, he was proven to be absolutely correct, and he was spot on the money, because when PowerShell was shipped, PowerShell for Windows was shipped, it was just, well, for admins, brilliant. As you know, as administrator, admins would be lost without PowerShell if they're managing large Windows fleets. It's almost impossible. It can't be done. So he pushed for that and got it in. And I have to say, kudos to the guy. And he was then rewarded. He was re-promoted back to where he was, and eventually I think he became chief architect for Windows Server, which I think at the time when he was promoted, I think it was only like Dave Cutler and maybe somebody else had been the chief architect of Windows Server, because it was, and then he went from there to be an Azure architect and was involved in other bits and pieces as well. I think he kind of finished up being responsible for the I can't remember what the title is now, he kind of finished with the Azure stuff, moved into Office 365, and then I think was kind of eventually ended up in the modern Office or modern technology platform around there. So, or was it the modern digital transformation stuff? I think that's where it ended up. And yeah, it was kind of at that point, PowerShell was going great guns with PowerShell Core, and yeah, the open source of PowerShell. And so I think after 22 years, he's decided to move on to Pastors New. And I would say good luck to him, and thank you for PowerShell, because I think it's hard to underestimate the impact, the realization within Microsoft that you couldn't manage these massive things at the time using the GUI tools that you had available. It couldn't have been done. You had to have PowerShell for automation. And I think if that hadn't been pushed through, Microsoft would not be where it is today. Azure, would just not be where it is now. So I think Microsoft and many admins around the world owe Jeffrey Snover a debt of thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, PowerShell is great. There's a lot of things, a lot of little tricks. I've got a little notepad in OneNote, a little notebook with PowerShell tips and tricks that I have collected over the years. And quite often, so just try this, and you can get you out of a lot of trouble. PowerShell. So yeah, I find it not just from a sort of automation, but just from a handy little things to be able to do.
Absolutely.
Fan, I wanted to ask you about one thing this week. There's some news on the Raspberry Pi front.
Yes, there is. This is announced this morning, actually, I think. So it's kind of breaking news, really. It's today being Thursday. This is the new, I think it's a new Pi Pico. So effectively, I mean, the Pi Pico appeared a while ago now, which is, I think the Pi Pico is the RP2040 based device. So it's a kind of jumped up microcontroller.
Oh, that's the one I've got, isn't it? That I use for me. The
RP2040.
I don't use the. I use the controller board actually, but yeah, it's the same processor. Yeah.
Well, so this is the Pico W, which it's kind of it's still based on the Raspberry Pi silicon, but now it's got a 802.11n wireless LAN stuff, what have you. So it's a lot more usable if you're working in a wireless environment. You don't need to have any KK cable to make it work anymore, which is obviously very, very useful. Probably the price has gone up. It's at $6, I think now, which is up from $4. And that doesn't sound much, but you're getting very close to the cost of the next model up, which I think is the Zero, I think. So you're not that far for Zero. So it's quite a price. I'm not sure if that's caused by the fact that there is an issue with supply chain or what, but it does seem to be quite. I mean, obviously we say, oh, $4 cost. That's not much. When we're buying a lot, it is a lot. And of course, relatively speaking, that's a 50% hike in price for the benefit of wireless. So I'm not entirely sure what's caused that. But if you need wireless and you don't need that many, this seems to be quite a good device. So yeah, this came out today. A new Pi.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. Right, the one I used was a board designed for the controlling the light strip, which is the same processor, but it's not a Pi. It's dedicated for that light because it's got the light strip controls in it. But it's the same kind. It's the same physical looking device. But yeah, I like the idea with the wireless one because that's one of the things that with my device is it hasn't got that. So when I control those light strips, I have the host PC effectively pushing those commands down over the serial. So what I did was I wrote all the light routines into the what's the language? It was
Python.
Python. Yeah, it's a MicroPython, isn't it? Yeah. So I did all the little routines in that, and then it listens on the serial port, and then the host PC says, right, now do the Knight Rider light, or now do a circle or whatever. But if you could do it over wireless, then I could, you could make it listen and respond to things. So yeah, I think that'd be nice. It'd be nice for your tube project.
Yes, one of my many unfinished projects. Indeed.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, but yeah, that's great. So I mean, like,
there's always
there's always a use for these things, then I think somebody somewhere like, oh, this is just what I needed. So I guess some people say, oh, I don't need that, so you can get the one without the Wi-Fi on. But yeah, having that on there is pretty good. Maybe something that could be used for launch in space, or as we talked about last week, something for the greenhouse to transmit the sensors back, the collected sensors back to a controller or something like that.
Exactly. I mean, in space-wise, I would think you'd use it more to control a payload rather than be a payload, rather than be a sorry, it would use it to say control an individual payload rather than be a controller that controls everything. I think perhaps there you look at something that's more along the specs of a full Pi or similar. There are many other vendors out there that do SoCs that are similar. So, but yeah, it's a useful addition to the range. I think certainly it has been frustrating if you are a fan of that particular of the Pico not to have a wireless version. So it's now there. I'm not 100% sure how much stock is going to be available right now because there have been stock issues with many Pi components, as there are with the whole industry. So I would hunt around or get the orders in now. But otherwise, yeah, it's good to see. And again, it's always good to see being a tad nationalistic. It's always good to see a UK company doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a great thing to see, and every time they bring something else, it just has that DIY thing that sparks in the back of my mind. Think, what could I do with this? And sometimes it's a case of I get the Pi, or I got the light strip, and then thought, how do I control it? Or sometimes you have to get the Pi, and then you think, what can I do with the Pi? Or sometimes it's a proper application you've got for it. But yeah, they're not expensive, and you can tinker around. That's what I like with them. You can go all the way from MicroPython all the way up to Windows 11 on various Pis. So you can really tinker around to your heart's content with various operating systems and programming languages, and whatever you want. I mean, you could even go full fat Windows, as we've talked about in the past, all the way down to MicroPython. So yeah, they have a great range of products.
I mean, you could do. I would suggest you don't, but you could do. Yeah, full fat Windows will work on a Pi. A Pi 500 we have it working, but it's not. I don't think anyone's enjoying the experience, neither me nor Windows 11. So.
Yeah. I know. I don't think anyone anywhere has ever said you should do this. That's definitely in the category. Just wanted to see if it was possible, rather than actual real need to do it.
Absolutely. Although again, there's I think a great use case for obviously aside from automation and robotics and sensors and things, just as a pure consumer, there's some superb retro gaming rigs you can now build around Pis, and that's quite an educational process to sort of learn how these systems work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think once it gets into winter, I'll get my light strip out again and start customizing that. I think I should probably try and hook it up to a MIDI interface or something, so I can control the light strips from MIDI. That would be good. I'm sure you could probably. I'm sure there's probably a MIDI interface for the Raspberry Pi. There's bound to be. And then if I could get it, that would be quite good. If I could get it then to send as you're transmitting MIDI messages from a synthesizer, it could then do a bit like Jean-Michel Jarre thing, with the light strip responding to the MIDI. So that's something that would be quite cool. So I'm gonna have to have I keep thinking of all these ideas to do. Just it's finding the time to actually go and do them. That's always the trick.
That is the issue. I think definitely with Pis and any kits, it's. I've got so many unfinished projects at the moment, which I've begun, and thought, and then just I wouldn't say got bored. Actually no. Let's be fair. Got bored and moved on to the new cool thing, which I think is always occurs in IT. Isn't it? You think, oh, here's a great thing. I'm gonna write this thing, and a few weeks later, oh, here's another cool thing. You kind of flip between cool things, and it's just I'm aware of the fact I am my own worst enemy. I do intend to do the Doom Wall at some point. The Doom Wall is definitely going to happen.
Excellent. Yeah, that's I definitely want to see that.
Which it wasn't actually that difficult. I mean, I did make some progress. The main problem I had was getting enough coloured lights to make it work properly, and also I realised I hit all kinds of problems with refresh rates as well. But I got it working so it would run because you can run Doom at 320 by 200. So I ran it at that, and that's actually not that hard to do. It was just the sheer amount of wires that I had going all over the place to do that many pixels. So I had the way I did it was I had 320. Well, I was going to do 320 columns of 200 lights, which proved to be more difficult than I expected. But it did bits of it kind of worked. I just didn't get as far as buying all those lights in. I did a small bit first of all to see what it would be like, and then so perhaps I'll carry on and go for the full on row of lights.
Excellent. Yeah, well, we shall catch up with you a bit more on that next week. So where can we find you and your articles?
You can find me on Twitter at Richard_Speed.
Excellent. We'll be back same time, same place next week, hopefully with Gary as well. Thanks to Richard. We'll be back same time, same place next week. You can email me ian@thedigital-lifestyle.com. I'm at Dixon on Twitter. We'll play out with some more of my music, and I'll see you next week.